Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Bhagavad Gita, and this is chapter 8. Today, we are planning to cover from 1 to 16. It's divided into two parts, 1 to 8 first, and then 9 through 16. The format is that for 1 to 8, you're going to have two people reading in English, just from 1 to 8. We're going to start with Penny, followed by David. Then Yogeshwar is going to talk about 1 through 8. He's going to read it out in Sanskrit and talk about his understanding of it. Then we will go to comments and questions from everybody. Once we're done with that, we are going to move on to 9 through 16. All right, Penny, if you could get us started.
Right, chapter 8, the way to eternal Brahman. Tell me, Krishna, what Brahman is. What is the Atman? And what is the creative energy of Brahman? Explain the nature of this relative world and of the individual man. Who is God who presides over action in this body, and how does he dwell here? How are you revealed at the hour of death to those whose consciousness is united with you? Brahman is that which is immutable and independent of any cause but itself. What we consider Brahman as lodged within the individual being, we call him the Atman. The creative energy of Brahman is that which causes all existences to come into being. The nature of the relative world is mutability. The nature of the individual man is his consciousness of ego. I alone am God who presides over action here in this body. At the hour of death, when a man leaves his body, he must depart with his consciousness absorbed in me. Then he will be united with me. Be certain of that. Whatever a man remembers at the last, when he is leaving the body, will be realized by him in the hereafter, because that will be what his mind has most constantly dwelled on during this life. Therefore, you must remember me at all times and do your duty. If your mind and heart is set upon me constantly, you will come to me. Never doubt this. Make a habit of practicing meditation and do not let your mind be distracted. In this way, you will come finally to the Lord, who is the light giver, the highest of the high.
Thank you, Penny. Now we'll go to David to read verses 1 through 8.
Thanks very much, Jones. This is chapter 8 by Sri Aurobindo, the immutable Brahman. Arjuna said, "What is Tad Brahma? What Ajatama? What karma, O Purushottama? And what is declared to be Adibuta? What is called Adidaiva? What is Adiyajna in this body, O Madhusdana? And how in the critical moment of departure from physical existence art thou to be known by the self-controlled?" The Blessed Lord said, "The Akshara is the supreme Brahman. Swabhava is called Adhyatma. Karma is the name given to the creative movement Visarga, which brings into existence all beings and their subjective and objective states. Adibhuta is Ksharobhava, Adidaiva is the Purusa. I myself am the Lord of sacrifice. Adhyajna, here in the body, O best of embodied beings. Whoever leaves his body and departs remembering me at his time of end, comes to my bhava, that of Purushottama, my status of being. There is no doubt of that. Whosoever at the end abandons the body, thinking upon any form of being, to that form he attains, O Kaunteya, into which the soul was at each moment growing inwardly during the physical life. Therefore, at all times remember me and fight, for if thy mind and thy understanding are always fixed on and given up to me thou shalt surely come. For it is by thinking always of him with consciousness, united with him in an undeviating yoga of constant practice, that one comes to the divine and supreme Purusa or Partha.
Thank you, David. I know that was challenging 8 verses. So next up, we have Yogeshwar.
Arjuna uvacha kim tad brahma kim adhyatmam kim karma purushottama adibhutam cha kim proktam adidevam kimuchyate. The question here is rising out of the previous chapter. In the previous chapter, Krishna talked about what the knowledge know, what the enlightened know. So they know these perspectives of reality. They know Brahma, and they know what Adhyatma is, and they know what Karma is. Adibutam, Adideva, and Adiyagya. So these 6 perspectives is what the question is about. What do the enlightened know? And now Arjuna is asking a question about those 8 things, or those 6 things rather, that these 6 perspectives, what are they, and how do I come to know about them? So this question has risen in Arjuna's mind. They know it through experience, but could you explain to me what they know? Like, we know that scientists have done some experiments and they've found out something. Now, how can I do a smaller version of that experiment? Can I know it, or can I have the script of the experiment? Can I have the article of the experiment that was carried out? That's what Arjuna is trying to ask for. What do the enlightened know? Adiyagya katham kotra dehesmin madhusudana prayana kale cha katham jneyosi niyatatmabhi. So this whole section of 2 verses talks about this question, the 2 questions that about what we should know. Even if we can't carry out the experiment ourselves, we are not the scientists, we don't have all those equipment, but can we have that article paper, the science paper that was released about what the experiment and how it was carried out and what were the findings of the experiment? So what do the enlightened know? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavodhyatmamuchyate Bhuta Bhavodbhavakaro Visarga Karma Sangitaha. So the first question gets the first answer. Aksharam Brahma Paramam. So what is Brahma? What is the Brahma that you've been talking about since? And even from the 2nd chapter, where it's talked about Brahma Nirvana Gacchati, you've been talking about Brahma since. So what is that Brahma that has been talked about since the start of Gita? Now, there Krishna puts it like this: Aksharam Brahma Paramam. So Brahma is the word being defined. Aksharam and Paramam are the definitions. So 2 words to define that one word. Aksharam meaning it does not change in nature. And since it does not change in nature, then it also does not fade away. meaning it does not die away. So two perspectives here is Aksharam means it does not die. It's always there. And for anything to be always there, it should not change at any one point in time, because once change happens, change indicates that it may change until the point that it dies away. So any change that we see is not Brahma. That is one thing that has been put in context here. Paramam. Now that word means the ultimate. So that which is ultimate. One word that describes it is that which does not change or die. And the other word is that which is ultimate. In the path of enlightenment, or even in the normal world, that which is the ultimate is called Brahma. Now, if we talk about enlightenment, you know Brahma, you know what the life force is. And in another perspective, if we put it from our perspective or the meditative perspective, even in this world, that which is the ultimate, the essence. For example, in chapter 7, Krishna talked about, I am the light in the moon and the sun, and I am the strength in the people who have strength. I am the wisdom in the wise. So even in the perspective of the world, that which is the essence, that which is the ultimate is Brahma. It brings out the essence of Brahma. Swabhava Adhyatma Muchyate. What is Adhyatma? Adhyatmam is Swabhava. Only one word to describe it. Swabhava. So this is what brings the world about, like Swabhava. Many translations or commentaries take it as Prakriti, that which enables the world to go on. Like, for example, Prakriti means our nature. So one translation or commentary puts it as our nature, and our nature is how we will act in the world. So that which is innate, that which we are made of, that is Swabhava. And taking it further into context is, what are we? What is our Swabhava? What should we really be doing? Like, how are we made? That is what we are. That ability that gives us, that which gives us the ability to think or to do any action is our Swabhava. We all have different Swabhavas in the world context and in the experiential context. Like, what is the ultimate? We all have one Swabhava. We all have one Swabhava. We all have one nature, that of our Atman, that of our true reality. So pointing towards that one Swabhava that we all have, that we all have within ourselves, that Atman. So that is also our Swabhava. Bhuta bhavat bhavakara visarga karma sangita. Now, karma, it has been talked about in chapter 2, chapter 4, over and over again. So what is karma? And Arjuna asked this question again. What is karma? And Krishna here gives a different explanation totally to what has been said in the Gita so far. Bhuta bhavodbhavakara visarga karma sangita. So that which makes about beings coming into this world. Bhuta bhava udbhavakara. So that which brings about our manifestation in the world. So any manifestation in the world is brought about by karma. So that action that brings about manifestation, whether it is manifestation of the mind, so how the mind manifests into this world is through action, or whether it is the manifestation of like our own nature. So our own nature manifests in the world by our karma. Taking into context of Gita, what here really it indicates is this manifestation, all this, whatever we see in the whole world, it's brought about by karma. Anything we can talk about. So even Brahma, how it manifests, how Brahma manifests in this world is through karma. So whatever we are seeing, it's a manifestation of Brahma in a way, and how it is manifested is through karma. Adibutam ksharo bhava purushascha adhiyagyohamevatra dehe deha bhritamvara. So what is Adibutam? So it is ksharo bhava. So now we can compare and contrast, whereby Krishna talking about Aksharam Brahma. So Brahma is Aksharam. It doesn't fade away, it doesn't die, it doesn't change. So what is Adibutam? Adibutam is that which fades away, that which changes. And that is the manifestation in the world. So what manifests out by karma is the world itself, and that is Adibutam. Whatever we are seeing with our eyes, whatever we take in with our ears, with our five senses, basically, is Adibutam. Whatever we can perceive changes. Even our mind is a part of that change. So all that which changes is Adibutam. And Purushascha Devatam. So if we take it into the context of Sankhya, that which is Purusha is Adidevatam. So Sankhya talks about this concept of Purusha and Prakriti. When we, as the Atman, interact with this world, it brings about that which is manifest in this world. But who are we? Who are we in the context of reality? What we are is Purusha, according to Sankhya. And that Purusha is what interacts with the Prakriti, what interacts with the nature, and now it brings about the manifestation in the world. So I'd just like to talk about these concepts in the way that we could understand them in a more modern way. So if we could talk about Brahma is the underlying reality of what is. If we talk about Adhyatma, it is what makes, for example, let's see, Brahma is the underlying reality, and then Adhyatma is that small curtain that hides Brahma, and through which Brahma will now show itself. Yeah. And then that karma is that by which manifestation comes about. And the manifestation is the Adibutam. What we see is the Adibutam. So any noun that we could name is Adibutam. Any verb that we know is karma. And how the verb and noun come about? So far, what we know is by our nature, because our nature interacts with the world. And our nature is different from what we are. So what we are is the Purusha, that is the Adidevatam. And adhiyagyo hame vatra dehe deha bhritam vara. So here Arjun is being given, Arjun is being called upon that deha bhritam vara, that a person who is the best person out of all those who have a body. Arjun is being called upon as that person who is the best upon all those who are manifest or who have a body. And Krishna is telling him that Adhiyagya is me. I am Adhiyagya. If we could take into context of Adibutam, Adidevam, and Adhiyagya, what that means is, because all the three have Adi in front of them, yeah. So what all these three bring about is three things: the manifest, which is really shown to you in front of your eyes, that is Adibutam. What are you? You are Purusha, as you'll know yourself when you get away from your nature. So I am Purusha. And then what I am, I meaning Krishna, what Krishna is Adhiyagya, something that even is within you. So Adhiyagya is even within Purusha. One thing in Indian thought that is really brought about here is there is this body that we know about, and there is the mind that we also know about. So putting all that into Adibhutam, when you get separated from the mind and the body function, you will realize that I am Purusha. Yes. And then you also realize an underlying reality, something that is unmanifest, something that is not you. But when you dive into it, you get a feel of reality. And when you dive into it, you as perspective, like I, the perspective of I, totally dissolves. So when you dive into that, like for example, why it is called Adhiyagya here. Adhiyagya is really something that brings about the perspective of fire. When you put in anything into fire, it perishes. Now, the same thing happens when the I or the ego delves into Adhiyagya. It perishes. It becomes one with the fire. It totally disappears. There's nothing left about it. Yeah? So that is in all manifest. I am that Adhiyagya. I am the underlying reality within everything. And fire is really important in Indian thought in a way that it brings out different perspectives of thought, whereby anything put into it perishes. Another thing is fire is totally different from all the other elements. All the other elements would flow downward. If we could say earth, it flows. If we just throw it into air, it will come down. If we make water flow, it will flow towards a downward path. Even air, the heavier air, like we say carbon dioxide, would come downwards in a room. So, oxygen, which is heavier, would come downwards in a room, and carbon dioxide, which is lighter, would go upwards. So the heavier thing, like whatever is heavy, will come downwards. Now, in the context of fire, there is one thing that it always goes upwards. Like, even though you put the matchstick upside down or you put the candle upside down, the fire will always go upwards. However you want it to go, it will always go in one direction, that is up. It will never go in any other direction that you want it to go. Yeah. So that one thing with fire that is being talked about here. And also another perspective of fire is, when we have a candle, we can lit up 1,000 candles with it, but that candle, it has its own fire as it had it before lighting the thousand candles. But if we take into perspective earth or air or water, when we want to put, like if we have 2 buckets and we want to put more soil in another bucket from this one bucket, the soil in the first bucket must reduce in quantity. That's not the case with fire. With fire, you can lit up 1,000 candles and the first candle will be as lit as it was before. The same thing with water. If you want to fill up the second bucket of water, this first bucket has to get that much empty. Even with air, like if we have 2 containers with air and we want to if we have a vacuum and then we want to transfer air into that vacuum, yeah, and then we want to transfer air out of that vacuum. So there is that context of it has to be filled with air and then we have to get air out of it and then we can make a vacuum out of it. Now there we can even measure that air has gone in and then air has gone out of it, and then the other vacuum has been the other vacuum has been filled with the air, and that will bring a increase and decrease of in weight. But if we take in the context of fire, one thing is it doesn't have weight, like you can't measure the weight of fire. Another thing is, however much, even though you have buckets and buckets of fire, if you want to transfer fire, the first bucket, like the first candle, it stays as lit. There's no reduction in the fire. And that's a beautiful concept here, because however much Brahma manifests in this world, there is no part of Brahma that is affected. It is just as fire is. It is just as it was before. No reduction, no increment. It's just as it is. So that's the concept of fire. Yajna is always mainly put in the context of fire in Indian thought. So fire has a really big, let's say, it actually gives a lot to the Indian thought. And that's why a lot of Indian thought goes around fire and makes fire as something that is responding to the ultimate. It resonates with something that is ultimate. So when you look at fire, it tells you more about the ultimate than other elements would do. That's why you can have all these sacrificial rites and they're all around fire. Now, it's not about the action or the karma that you're doing around, or the puja or the seva that you're doing around the fire. What it is about is that thought that comes in your mind and how the fire represents the Brahma in our lives. Like the best example that we could give of Brahma would be fire. And that's how it is put into context in chapter 7 is, I am that light that is in all those that give out light. Yeah. So I am that which even lights up the fire. So looking at that Brahma, which is in the manifest of fire, it could give out a lot. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sanshayah. So now the last concept that is talked about in the context of the questions that Arjun asked is, one part of it is Brahma is known at the end of your life. Yeah. Another part is that how do we know that Brahma at the end of the life? So, what end of life here? There are two possible descriptions of end of life in Indian thought. One end of life is as we know it, like end of this body, as we know it. Why we know it as end of life is because we attach to this body so much that when this body perishes, we say end of life, like that is an end. Another perspective to end of life is separating from this body. You see, we also call the first part as separating from this body. If we stick to the concept of there is something separate from this body. So if there is something separate from this body, when we separate from this body, yeah, and that could be at 2 points in life. One is when we die, that is separation, like total separation. Another point in separation of this body is enlightenment. Now, that is the second perspective. Like you're totally not described by the body. You are not identified with the body. So you are separate from the body, and your body, in a way, how you describe your body is separate from you. So in a way, your body has died for you. It's come to an end. Like your identification with the body has come to an end. So that is also one perspective of death. And there is that perspective of death of your ego. Now, when your ego has died, your I has died, it is death. Basically, that's your death. Now, reality comes after that. Like you understand Brahma after that. And even saying that you understand Brahma after that, it is like you have to use it in language, but there is no you after that. So when we say death, it is in two perspectives. One is the death that we see with our eyes, like what we know about. And another death is separation from this body. That happens at the point of enlightenment. And that could also mean Antakala. So Antakala is the dissolving of your ego, dissolving of the identity of the I. That is also separation from the body, which also means death in Indian thought. Now, how that could be put in context, yeah, is if we first put it into context of what we know as death right now, is Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshaya. So even when you're on your deathbed, if you get to know Brahma, yeah, you get to become one with Brahma. Like now, the point here is if you get to know Brahma at your deathbed, even then you get to be one with Brahma. Now, another point or perspective in here is if you can do it before your deathbed, well and good, and that will be the best thing to do. But even if that realization comes at your deathbed, you will get to know Brahma. There is no problem with that. So the second context that we could put this in is that where your ego dissolves, and that is your death of you, or like that's basically death. So there's no any other name you could give to it but death, because if there is no I, there is no ego, there is no perspective of what I am. So when that perspective goes away, you're dead, basically. And in a way, not in not in a bad way, but in a good way, you're dead. Yeah? You're dead by the fact that you're not identifying with the body. And another point in that is, if you are separated from this body, and that is the only point in time that you can know Brahma, if you're not identified with this body, you can know Brahma, because you're not identified with this body, you're identifying as separate from this body and one with Brahma, one with ultimate reality. So only then can you know the ultimate reality, when you're not looking at reality from the perspective of your own nature, or from the perspective of your senses, or the perspective of your mind. That is only when you can know reality. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. So, putting it in the context of death, and that is what is actually meant here. The other perspective of enlightenment, I just brought it as it's part of Indian thought, but that is not what is being talked about in this part of Gita. Yeah. So what is being talked about in this part of Gita is deathbed, when we are leaving this body. Now, in this 6th verse, what Krishna is saying, that whatever we are thinking about when we are dying, it is what we receive at the end, at the start of another body. Now, how I could put it into context, or what we know, or what we realize, or what we experience, is when we sleep, when we are asleep, if you're really aware of your thoughts, if you can get that aware of your thoughts, when you sleep, the last thought you have when you sleep is the first thought you have when you wake up. If you can really minutely be aware of your thoughts, you can know that. And your dreams will not be in context, but what will happen is your dreams will be there as well. Yes, but the last thought when you slept will be the first thought when you wake up. And you will see that what you dreamt about was really just a phase, and it was not part of the reality as you know it. Huh? So what reality will do is last thing, first thing. It's like when an act is going on, or when a play is going on, and an actor goes behind the curtains and then comes back in front of the curtains as another person. It's just an act, it's just a play. So, and that's what is happening. So you're just going behind the curtains, and the way you go behind the curtains is the same way you come out and come in front of the curtain. The same thought will be in there. And another perspective is sada tad bhava bhavita. Now, what happens here is what the point that is being made here is that which you are thinking constantly about during your life is what you'll be thinking about during your death. That's what will come up when you're on your deathbed. If I'm constantly thinking about one thing, as in, there's also one part of thought which is conscious, and then there's the unconscious part of thought. Now that, not only the conscious, but the unconscious as well. That unconscious part of thought that we have, and that which drives the conscious. So that which we put into the unconscious, and which is always there, whatever thought comes or goes, that unconscious that is always there, it is what comes up when we are on a deathbed. And that which comes up when we are on our deathbed will ultimately decide on what type of new life that we get. And that's how everything comes into context here. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhya cha mayyarpita mano buddhir mame vaishyasya sanshayam. So for that reason, because on your deathbed, you'll always remember what you have put in consciously or unconsciously in your thought. That's what you'll remember on your deathbed. For that reason, you should constantly, always remember me and keep on contemplating on the nature of reality or what Brahma is, and that which does not fade away or that which does not perish between all this manifestation that changes and perishes constantly. So in that context, what we could have, what we know or what we should just
Yogeshwar? I think he may be. Oh, there you are. He's coming
oh
back.
yeah, sorry.
No problem. You just pause for a few, about 15 seconds.
Okay. So internet problem here. So just now, that which you're consciously putting into your thought and that which is also unconscious in your thought. So both perspectives. You have to drive both perspectives towards knowing reality as it is, knowing that which does not perish between all those manifestations that are perishing and changing constantly. So knowing that ultimate reality or that life force that drives every manifestation in the world. You should always contemplate on that, and contemplating on that, you will get to know it. And that's what you'll know at the end of your life. And then you will, if you know that, even by the end of your life, then you will actually realize Brahma and you'll get to be one with Brahma. Now, how do you do that is being talked about in the 8th verse is Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagavina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanuchintayan. How that will happen is Abhyasa yoga. You have to constantly contemplate on it. You have to constantly ask questions about it. You have to constantly practice. What's the best way I can get to it? Is it through breath? Is it through contemplating using my mind? Is it through postures? Is it through making my body the best it could be, or making my mind the best it could be? And then knowing that which is underlying between all life forms. Everyone has their own different specific way of getting towards Brahma. And there are models that could be formed around, but we should know that all those models are just an explanation of reality. And there is an underlying reality that is there, that is always there. And to get to it, we have to constantly practice, whether that practice is bodily practice or mental practice or contemplation or however you'll want to put it. But constantly wanting to get towards the nature of reality is how you get towards reality here. So now, any questions or comments?
So folks, go ahead and it's a lot to chew on. Go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat for any comments or questions. Jyoti, followed by Elena, followed by Evanik.
Yeah, Yogeshwar, I asked you last week about the sanskara. Is that what it is then? That you are at the time of your death, if you are thinking about something, that becomes a memory becomes your sanskara. Is that what it is then? Or it is just the reaching out for Brahma?
No, sanskara is actually this, that which you are always contemplating on. So if you contemplate on something that is outside you, basically any manifestation, so you will have such a sanskara. Sada tad bhava bhavita. So the first thing that you mentioned about you contemplating on anything, yeah, so that will become part of you. It will become a memory of you, an unconscious memory of you, and that will be your sanskara. So what in the last verse, what Krishna is trying to say is, let all those sanskaras perish away and just know me as I am, not by the angle of your sanskaras, but by the angle of reality. Let it be.
Thank you.
Great question. Actually, what verse was that? Was that number 8 that you were referring to just now, Yogeshwar?
What Jyoti was asking about is verse 6,
Oh,
the
verse 6.
last part. Yeah, it is sada tad bhava bhavita.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so that is sanskara.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Next up, we have Elena, followed by Evanik, then Penny.
All right, thank you. Yogeshwar, so going back to samskara, why is it all the described samskaras practically have to do something with hair? What's the significance of that? First question. And then the conscious and subconscious, it seems to be that, yes, the reality, the dream, and the reality is the dream of, so it's merged. So do you have any techniques that you would do to contemplate on, apart from breathing, of course, apart from meditation, to focus on something that you'd like to bring more in your manifested reality? Thank you so much.
So the question about sanskara, what happens with sanskara is, one thing that I had mentioned in the previous meetup as well is, see, one thing we have is prakriti, means our own nature. And the second thing is sanskara or sanskriti. Yeah? And that means what we do to mold our own nature. That is sanskara. And the third thing is vikruti or vikara, which means that which we do, and it is not by our nature. It is in a different direction of our nature. But we are still doing things that are in different directions with our nature, even in our normal life. Yeah. So sanskara basically means is, you know your nature, and then you mold, you have actions, whether it is physical or mental actions, and then you mold your mind, you mold your body in a way that it is in sync with your nature. It doesn't go away from your nature. And that is what sanskara is about, sanskriti is about. And the second question that you asked about is any other that we could know. So another thing is, so one is meditation, that is what you talked about is dhyana yoga, so meditating upon one thing. in a manifestation form. Another way you could do it is being aware of that thing. Not, these two things are different, yeah? Meditating upon one thing is just putting all your concentration on it and not contemplating on it, not thinking about anything about any other thing. Now, being aware basically means just be and know what is around you. When you just be and know what is around you, like just be seated and feel the air that goes around you. Don't try to focus on anything particular, but just feel it as it is. Don't try to control it, but just feel it as it is. So when you're aware of things that are around you, when you get that perfect awareness, then you could also mold things that are around you and make them part of you in a way that you can tame your awareness to go where you want it to go if you are aware of things around you. So just being aware of you being seated, and then which part of my body is on the chair or which part of my body is touching the ground. And basic things, even basic things that we forget being aware of is, like, for example, if we're wearing specs, and we totally forget that we are wearing specs, but just being aware that, oh, I'm wearing specs and I can feel the specs on the tip, on the base of my nose, and on my ears, they are actually there. So being aware about these small subtle things in our life is also really important around us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. And thanks, Joe, for filling in. Next up is going to be Evanik. Evanik, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Yogeshwar, when you were talking about what you think about in this life, will be ultimately what you think about on your deathbed and what's going to manifest. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but manifest in your next life. And I was thinking like that, the idea of why you should just let go and focus on your core, because that's what you're going to focus on your next life. It does have a ripple effect. If you're constantly focusing in on what's wrong with your life, you're going to carry that into the next life. But if you're focusing on what's good and what's at the core, that's what you're going to take into your next life. So I think letting go of the hurts and the pain in the past almost has an insurance that you don't bring that into another lifetime. So thank you for that.
Evanik, I wanted to comment on that. Actually, when I was listening to Yogeshwar talk about this, while I had one earphone on my call, there is a very profound point here. And Yogeshwar kind of alluded to that when he was comparing that to how you go to sleep as how you wake up, okay? The Indian thought is cyclical, that you're going through these cycles, infinite cycles. And I think that actually captures the nature of life. Nature of life is like that, it's cyclical. So if you do certain good things, the very next moment, you have the advantage of that. So the 1 hour you spend living well helps you in the next hour. One day you live well, it actually moves the next day up. If you live one day badly, that moves the next day down. And that is very profound about nature of life itself and nature of human consciousness. So when you do right things, they build on one another. So that's why Sri Krishna is saying, always think of me as if you're going to die tomorrow, or as if you're going to die this moment. Because if you do that, that means if you are focused on the highest things, all the life that you're leading is going to be as best as it can be. It's like, even the Stoics have a practice like that of saying, imagine that you're going to die now. What would you do? and live like that, live, at that level. It's the same idea that if you do things right for this moment, as if this was your last moment, then all your moments, all your lives, all your hours, all your days are going to be better. So thank you. I just wanted to, add that to what Yogeshwar is saying. Thank you. Next up is going to be Penny, David, and this guy called Joe. Penny. Penny, you need to unmute.
Sorry. In the fourth verse, when you were talking about, there were a lot of Sanskrit words. One that you said a couple times was, I think, something like Purusa. And I got lost whether that's like the way people are now, or is that the way you are once you see Brahman?
Go ahead, Yogeshwar. What is Purusa?
Yeah, Purusa, what that is the identification of I, but without the ego. So in Indian thought, Indian enlightenment, what the process in here is, you first do not identify with the world, with the body, with the mind. So there is something that still remains. Yeah. So that is the Purusha. When you're not identifying with the mind and the body, that is Purusha. Now, what Brahma comes about is when you become one with Brahma, when even the Purusha is not, like even when the I is not. So when the I is totally dissolved into Brahma, like that drop that goes into the ocean and becomes one with the ocean. Now, if we talk about that example, the drop itself is the Purusha in its purest way. And that is when it can become one with the ocean. And so that's how I would put it.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps.
Thank you. Next up is David, followed by Joe. David.
Yes, thanks. My question about the commentary from Yogeshwar is this, I guess the word is smara, that there's in many religions, there's a concept of a deathbed acceptance of Jesus, God, in Judaism and Christianity and others. And it seems very much that he was speaking of, thinking about accepting this Brahman, the Atma, at the moment of death, versus Smaran, if at least I understand from the translations I'm seeing, is remembering, as opposed to thinking about, which implies that one has to, that it's remembering this existence already, remembering something that one has previously accepted. So I'm curious about this concept of if Hinduism, or at least in the Gita, it's really this concept of having sort of this deathbed conversion, or if it really is that one is remembering an existing belief and acceptance of the Atma and the Karma and this. Is it remembering, or is it thinking of?
Okay. Now, so there are two things here. One is remembering, which would put us just smara. So the word here is anusmara, not just smara. So smara would mean remembering. Yeah. Anusmara in a context here means it's not about remembering any thought as per se, or remembering a belief, or remembering an image, but it is about remembering your true nature, which you already know. It's because in Indian thought, you already know who you are. It's just that you've forgotten. So this is the anusmara that is here. It is knowing yourself as you are. And it actually happens when, and I've read so many people who have become enlightened. What they say is, even in the context of Buddha, like what he said is, I've not received anything. I've just lost what was not me. So in that context is, he just remembered what he always was. So that is the context of anusmara. It's not about remembering in the physical way that we remember, like we remember a thing or a physical manifest in the world, but it's about remembering your true nature.
Well, I understand, but just to clarify, I mean, the Amusmara is verse 7, but in verse 6 and 5, it talks about smaram just as remembering, if I understand correctly. So just, I mean, and then, yes, in verse 7, it's talking about this constantly remembering me and this fighting in your mind and spiritual intelligence. But in 5 and 6, it's remember me in these final moments. I mean, when you're going to give up the body.
So the
Yeah.
way I
Now
would
about,
go ahead, Yogeshwar.
okay, so about that, yeah. So 5 and 6, this is interesting because I also talked about it before, not in this meetup, but in discussions that we had here in the physical place, yeah. So smara here, basically it's about, right now we do not know who we are. So there is something that we have to think about. There's something that we have to remember in a way. And what they are talking about in 5 and 6 is remembering something that will take you towards Brahma. For example, when Krishna talks about the essence in the fire, or in the essence in the sun and the essence in the moon. So remembering that, or you're remembering Krishna as he is, yeah? Like Arjuna had Krishna in front of him. So Krishna is saying, remember me. In that context, when even like anybody, if Arjuna would see Krishna, he will automatically get to have this feeling about knowing himself as well. If he could just remember Krishna. Because in a way, when we remember a person, we don't only remember the picture of the person, we don't only remember the words he spoke, but we remember an essence of the person. We have a feeling about the person himself. So in the way, when you remember Krishna, if Arjuna remembers Krishna, so when Krishna is in front of him, what happens is when Arjuna remembers Krishna as he is, he doesn't only remember the picture of Krishna, he doesn't only remember what Krishna told him, but he has that remembrance of that state in which Krishna is. And when he remembers that, he knows what he is as well.
Wonderful. So one point I wanted to make is that all of these are concepts of consciousness, and the concepts of consciousness that are there in the Indian philosophy are very different from the concepts of consciousness in the West. So for example, your original question was, is this memory or is this thinking? Right? The way in which the Indian mind thinks here is that you're saying firstly that this is already a part of you. Remember that. It's really, the best word I can use is concentration, attention. It is saying, direct your attention to me, direct your attention to the core of the being. Remember it. All of it is a way of saying, point yourself to that, do dhyan on that. That is what, underlying concept here is that of dhyan or concentration, which is a really core idea around which concepts of consciousness in the Indian philosophy are based. So thank you. Next up is Joe.
That's a tough act to follow. I was just actually calling, I had a quick question about the distinction in how karma is different and redefined, the way you used it this evening versus traditionally. about how it's actually Brahma is brought through karma. And what's the difference from the previous definition? Just so I have that.
Okay, in a way, karma is one thing which is always there, like activity, that's it in English, yeah?
Mhm.
Now, how it has been viewed in the previous verses is how we do activity, like our activity, like how karma can can take us to enlightenment, karma yoga, or how karma should be done when we are enlightened. But the context of karma here is how Brahma manifests through karma, through activity. Like, you see, all this creation is a representation of Brahma in a way. It's the activity of creation is Brahma itself. It's the manifestation of Brahma in a way. So before this, karma was a concept of us approaching karma and how we should use karma to get to Brahma. This is how Brahma manifests in the world.
Yeah, this is a fantastic, fantastic point and great question, Joe. I mean, to kind of look at it as a, at a very large level, the thing I find incredibly beautiful about Gita is that Krishna is describing the same thing from so many different angles. So here, what he's saying is that karma means what you should be doing is actually, karma is the name given to the creative movement visarga, which brings into existence all beings and their subjective and objective states. This is from Sri Aurobindo's translation. So it is saying that's how the nature flows. That's how the Brahman flows. So you're kind of you're saying it's like the Wu Wei. It is, it's equivalent of a Wu Wei in Tao. It's saying there is path through which Brahma flows. And that's what karma is. Previously, he was talking about karma is something that you should do from that angle. And he's pointing out that actually the reason why you should be doing it, because it is actually pointing to how Brahma expresses itself in nature. All right, shall we go to the next section? It's going to be from 9 through 16. So let's start with David first this time, and then Penny. David.
I have a question.
Balshid, go ahead.
I really didn't know how to enter that line of questioners and indicate
Sure.
to you.
It's just to give you for future, just go ahead and type exclamation mark, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Go ahead, Balshid.
All right. So I just wanted a clarification on that. Today we read chapter 8 and the first 8 verses of the chapter 8.
Yes, and now we are about to read from 9 through 16.
All right, okay. And my second question is that when we talk about sanskara and moving our whole being towards identifying with our real nature, so different changes and modifications that we work towards the sadhana, but where is the element of the dark in this? Because it's not just about kindness and being honest.
Sure.
But also the dark, being aggressive when it's needed, like Mahabharata is standing up against your own family, right?
Absolutely. That's what the rest of the Gita is about. So this is, we are just looking at 8 verses from chapter 8. So not all aspects of life are covered in each of the verses or each set of verses. So you have to read the whole Gita, and Gita absolutely talks about all these darknesses and how to think about them. So please, remain with us. And we've done several meetups, so you can look them up on YouTube. And we, continue to do it. But that's a fantastic question, and Gita absolutely talks about it. These verses are not talking about it.
I get that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So let's now go from 9 through 16. We'll start with David and then Penny. David, go ahead.
Okay, so this is other translation I think is more understandable. So again, chapter 8, 9 through 16. One meditates on the omniscient, primordial, the controller, smaller than the atom, yet the maintainer of everything whose form is inconceivable, resplendent like the sun, and totally transcendental to the material nature. One who at the moment of death, with an undeviating mind, by the power of science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness, engaged in devotional service, properly establishes the life breath between the eyebrows and achieves the effulgent supreme personality. That path which the learned knowers of Vedic scriptures declare imperishable, into which the great renowned ascetics devoid of sensual desires enters, and that which striving to reach the vow of celibacy is maintained, I shall explain to you in summation. Withdrawing from sense objects all the senses of the body and steadying the mind within the heart, fixed in self-realization with the life breath in the head is being established perfectly in the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness. Anyone uttering the indestructible monosyllable Om, the transcendental sound vibration of the ultimate truth, remembering me continuously, thus relinquishing their body in this way, achieves the supreme goal. O Arjuna, for such a one perfecting the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness, without deviation, always engaged in constantly remembering me continuously, to him I am very easily attainable. The great souls have achieved ultimate perfection, take refuge of me. Never again assume this transitory birth full of misery. The residents of all the worlds, O Arjuna, from Brahma's world, the most evolved material planet in all the trillion of universes downwards, are subject to the cycle of repeated birth and death. But by taking refuge of me, O Arjuna, repeated rebirth ceases.
Thank you, David. Next up is Penny. Penny, if you could unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to read this last to start out. Make a habit of practicing meditation and do not let your mind be distracted. In this way, you will come finally to the Lord, who is the light giver, the highest of the high. He is all-knowing God, Lord of the emperors, ageless, subtler far than mind's inmost subtlety, universal sustainer, shining sunlight, self-luminous. What fashion his form has, who shall conceive of it? He dwells beyond illusion, the dark of Maya. On him let man meditate always, for then at the last hour of going hence from his body, he will be strong in the strength of this yoga, faithfully followed. The mind is firm, and the heart so full it hardly holds its love. Thus he will take his leave, and now, with the life force indrawn utterly, held fast between the eyebrows, he goes forth to find his Lord, that light giver who is greatest. Now I will tell you briefly about the nature of him who is called the deathless by those seers who truly understand the Vedas. Devotees enter into him when the bounds of their desire are broken. To reach this goal, they practice control of the passions. When a man leaves his body and departs, he must close all the doors of the senses. Let him hold the mind firmly within the shrine of the heart and fix the life force between the eyebrows. Then let him take refuge in steady concentration, uttering the sacred syllable Om and meditating upon me. Such a man reaches the highest goal. When a yogi has meditated upon me unceasingly for many years, With an undistracted mind, I am easy of access to him because he is always absorbed in me. Great souls who find me have found the highest perfection. They are no longer reborn into this condition of transience and pain.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Penny. It's a beautiful, beautiful translation. Next up is Yogeshwar.
Kavim Puranam Manushasitaram Anorariyan Samanusmaredya Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat. So in the 8th verse, Krishna talked about that if a person is constantly contemplating on the ultimate, he gets to the ultimate, Paramam Purusham Divyam. He gets to that. He gets to the ultimate. Now, what are the qualities of the ultimate? What does he get to know about the ultimate at that point? And how does he receive the ultimate? Like, what does it look like? So that's what is in the 9th verse. So that ultimate Brahma is Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram. Yeah. So Kavim means the most knowledgeable you can think about. Puranam means in a way that it is so old, yeah, but still you always see it as new and new. Like whenever you contemplate on it, it's just new, however old it is. Yeah, it's the oldest concept, or it's the basis of reality, basically. So it's the oldest. Like there's nothing which is older than it. But every time you realize it, you experience it, it's just new and new, always. Anushasitara. And you get to know this basis of reality, that it is actually that which is pulling the strings. Yeah? We feel that we are pulling the strings in right, left, and center, that if I do something, I get to get the fruits of karma or anything. Like I am the one who has made this new technology, or I am the one who has explained to so many people. But when you get to know this basis of reality, it's like it is what is pulling all the strings. It is that life force within each and every one of us. And it's the one that is making the world go in all directions. And that is what is actually pulling all the strings. So you get to know it as not in a way of controller, like it controls each and every minute basis of it, but you get to know that it is the underlying reality, and from it all manifestations come. So each and every manifestation, whether it's even a thought, so it is through that life force that it comes about. Yeah? So anor aniyamsam, in that it is even more subtle than the subtlest thing that we can think about, or the subtlest thing that we know. It's even more subtle than that. So most translations will put it as an atom. And then, as we know in science today, that we have even divided the atom into minute parts, neutrons, electrons, and protons. So if we could say even smaller than that. Yeah. Now, when we're talking about smaller than that, it means that not small in physical perspective, not smaller than that in physical perspective, but it is even harder to know. It is more subtle. It's always there or in front of you, but it's really hard to know. It's hard to contemplate on it. Like it's subtle in that way. You can't get your head around it. It's just that. And then Sarvasya Dhataram, Achintya Rupam. So first thing is Sarvasya Dhataram. It is the basis of everything. Everything is on it. If it is not there, there's nothing. And Achintya Rupam. So you can't think about it, basically. If you start making up metaphors, you give examples, you are maybe you're making up a cookbook or you're making a travel guide, yeah, but it is not it. Like it's not the basis thing. It's not the ultimate reality. But yes, we do think about it in ways whereby it may be like a cookbook or a travel guide towards the ultimate. In that way, we can put our thoughts around it. But to think about it, it's not possible, like directly about it. Then Aditya Varnam Tamasaha Parasta. Now that is a perspective of experience. When you go towards Brahma, like right now, when we are experiencing anything, it is through the body, through the mind. When we get separated from it, and experientially, I can't say see it, because see would mean that you see it through the eyes, but not seeing through the eyes. What you experience, what is experiential to you, is that in your mental space, in your mind, there is that cloud of thoughts, there's that, all that, yeah? Now, when you separate from that, you realize that through that dense clouds of thought, contemplation, or the emotions that is all there, there is something that is beyond that. And that is the Aditya Varnam, Tamasa Parasa. The tamas is everything of this world. So it's tamasa means basically, in color, it means black color. And in guna, it means that which is basically which is below in a way. Yeah. Now, tamasa parastat means beyond that which you already know. Meaning that it is in a form of light, because I can't say this experientially, I have not experienced it, but through reading all these books on enlightened people, and they see a light, like they experience a light within them. So in a way, it is beyond this darkness that they see that light experientially, and they get one with that light. It's like a beam of light going into another beam of light, and it's just light into light, and it's only light remaining in that way. Prayana kale manasa chalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bhruvor madhye pranamaveshya samyak satam param purushamupaiti divyam. So there's a connection between 9 and 10, whereby anusmaredya. So if a person gets to know this, yeah, and how does he get to know this is prayana kale manasachalena. You have to keep a constant mind. You have to constantly focus your mind on one thing. Your mind should not be deviating towards different things. And that would be bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva. So your mind does not do different things. There are two ways to do that. One is bhaktya, using bhakti, using your profound emotion. Like when your emotion gets directed towards one thing, then your whole consciousness is directed towards that one particular thing. And another way is yoga balena. So you could also, by means of concentration, immense concentration, you can make your mind one fixed on one thing. So those are the two ways described here. And then what should you do with a constant mind? What should you do with that mind which is not moving? Bhruvor madhye pranamaveshya samyak. Yeah? You should concentrate your life force between your eyebrows. And there's a very big significance to this, because in the 7 chakras, if you're going upwards, yeah, after your Agya chakra, which is between your eyebrows, after your Agya chakra, that is when you get to the Sahasradhara. That's when you get to like at the back of your head. Is that at the top of your head, basically? There's that last chakra that is there. So to get there, there's this road, there's this way, there's this path that you have to go from. And that is the path of this Agya chakra. When you can concentrate all your life force onto that one specific point, it can, basically Agya chakra is a doorway, yeah? And the Sahasradhara is the last ultimate reality that you can know. So using this door, because you can't do anything to reality, like you can't basically do anything to get to the last chakra. What you can do is get past this Agnya chakra. So whatever in Gita is talked about, the last point is talked about is this chakra which is in between your eyebrows, because that is where you can do, like that is where activity stops. After that, you can't do anything. There's no activity, because you just become one with reality. You know reality as it is. You can't do anything ahead of that. That's why there's utmost importance given to that Agnya chakra between your eyebrows. If you can focus all your life force towards your eyebrows, then Satam Param Purusham Upaiti, you get to that ultimate state. So through this doorway of your Agnya chakra, you get to the Brahmarandra, to the Sahasradhara. You get to that point, which is at the top of your head, the last chakra. And that is when you become one with the ultimate reality. You get to know ultimate reality. Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti Vishanti Yatayo Vitaraga Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshe. So that which the enlightened know and that which the enlightenment talk about, that which all those people who have been separated from this body and they do not have any attachment towards the senses, those people, they experience it by becoming one with them. Vishanti yadyatayo vitaraga. So they become one with it, they enter it. Yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti. Those who want to get to it, what do? Brahmacharyam charanti. They perform all these activities that allow their life force to go upwards rather than downwards. Yeah? Tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe. I'm going to tell you in a very short form. I'm going to tell you about it. So there are 3 things that are being talked, 3 perspectives that are being talked about here. One, the people who are enlightened, they talk about it. Those who are separated from the body, they experience it and they enter it. And the third perspective is from the sadhaka's perspective, the perspective of the person who wants to attain it. Yeah? You go on a path which enables you to make your energies rise up towards the Agnya Chakra, towards the Brahmarandra. So that is Brahmacharyam. Brahmacharyam, in the meaning of the word, Brahmacharyam, meaning any activity that you do to get towards Brahma, to get towards the ultimate reality. That is Brahmacharya. And then there is also another perspective whereby it's translated to celibacy. Yeah, and it also has an importance to that, to translating it as celibacy. It's not the meaning of the word, but it gets the context, whereby, because when we are not in celibacy, our life force, or like all our sense attachments and our life force, it's moving downwards. It's always constantly being pulled down. But when we are on this path, we are not moving downwards. Rather, on the path of celibacy, we are moving upwards towards the chakras. And that also brings out the concept of Brahmacharya. Sarvadvarani sanyamya manoridhi nirudhya cha murdhanyadhayatmanah pranamastito yogadharanam. So, Sarvadvarani sanyamya. It could be put in two contexts. Basically, in yoga concept, what it's saying, we have 9 doors in this body, like there are 9 outlets or inlets. So a door is basically a door. When we talk about a door, we can either go in the house using it, or we can get out the house using it. So both ways, it's called a door. So whether it's an inlet or an outlet, it's a doorway. Yeah. The 9 doors are mentioned. Yeah. So those 9 doors, you have to basically don't allow your pranavayu, meaning your breath or any air, basically, because we also know that air could move through your ears, or yeah. So controlling all the pranavayu through these 9 doors, keep it towards your heart, keeping all your pranavayu or all your life force towards your heart. And another context we could put that in is Sarvadvarani Sanyamya is these 5 senses that we have. So we control the 5 senses that we have, not letting anything in, not letting anything out through the 5 senses, and then using all that energy towards the heart. And if I could put it into our experience, it's in a way, when we want something, yeah, just experience this. When we want something, there is that attachment that we have towards it and that want that we have towards it. So when we go and get it, that attachment or that want towards it, the attachment remains, but the want towards it, it's diminished. Yeah. So what is being said here is that when you realize that there's a want that wants to get out through your 5 senses, yeah, you take it, you see it, that it's there. Not stopping it, yes, but you see it, it is there. Now taking that want towards your heart and then contemplating whether, do I really want it or do I not want it? Does the core of me say that I should take it or should I not take it? And there's that force that actually, that want, that force. So use all that force and concentrate it towards the core. use all the force that takes you towards your 5 senses and take it towards the core. If you could do that, not by force, yeah, by contemplating on it, by actually now moving your wants from outside towards the inside. Now all your force will be towards your heart, and then murdhanyadhaya atmana prana. So slowly you get from what, if we can put it in the context of the chakras, the 3 main chakras that are put is the Muladhara chakra, which is at the base of your spine. Yeah? Right now, all your prana is there, all your life force is best there. Take it towards your heart. Take that life force towards your heart. Take all that want, all the desire towards your heart. And then from the heart, Murdhani Adhaya Atmana Prana. So from the heart, you take it upwards towards the Agnya chakra and use the Agnya chakra as a doorway towards the top of your head. And when it gets to the top of your head, there is that force that was going outside, but now you're using that force, the same force, because it's not going to be a different force that is going to come from outside. It's the same force that was taking you outside towards sense attachment objects, that the same force you're going to use to get towards that doorway and get towards the top of your head, that Brahmarandra, the last chakra. So that is the road of yoga. That's how you're going to take an experiential path towards the ultimate. Om ityekaksharam brahma vyaharan mam anusmaran yah prayati tyajandeham sayati paramam ghatim. So Om ityekaksharam brahma. Brahma, if you would put it into one syllable, it comes as Brahm, it comes as Om. So using that one syllable, which is Om, you use it to get towards the ultimate. So how you would use it in practice is you chant Om. And Om, in a way, it's one vibration that you feel. It goes away from you, and you also feel that it's coming back towards you. It's a two-way vibration. Like all the words, all the syllables that we speak, they just move away from our throat. Like they're made from our throat, they move from our mouth, and then they get out. And they're always moving outwards. But when you chant this syllable, Om, when you chant it, like in a specific way, in a specific rhythm, what happens is you chant it and you feel it that it's being chanted by you, it's moving out of your throat and it's going into the world. And then you also feel, there's also that feeling, because between you chanting Om and then you'll have a space because you'll have to take in air, and then you'll have to chant Om again. So that space in between where you have to take in air, you also feel the Om resonating back to you. It's coming back. So using that, chanting it and experiencing it coming back towards you, using that, you get to Brahma. And you get towards this path of from the Muladhara to the towards the heart, towards the top of your head. That whole journey. And Mam Anusmara. So contemplating on Brahma, you always try to remember, because there are these times during your spiritual path whereby you have these sparks that, oh, I think this is Brahma. I think I realized Brahma only for 1 second. Or there's this time when you get into this samadhi and it happens for like maybe a day or two, but you see, it doesn't continue happening. Like you're not continuously in that state. So you remember that time. Now, what happens in remembering, it's not only remembering that time contextually, like remembering it, the time and the date, but it's remembering the feeling. It's remembering the state in which you were. When you remember the state in which you are, in which you were at that time, that remembrance, it brings you towards that yes, I knew this state before. It has never gone away. It's just that I forgot it. So that remembrance of the state in which you were, for that state of samadhi or that spark that you got for even the 2 seconds that you had the spark for. So remembering it, remembering the essence of it, if I could say. Ya prayati tyajan deham sayati paramam gatim. If you remember that spark, or you get that spark of samadhi at the end, then you receive paramam gatim. You receive that state forever. Because what happens is, at the time of death, if you can't remember that, that means that you must have been contemplating on it for your whole life. Because what happens at the time of death is, basically, it's your whole life runs around you at that one moment. So it's like you're reliving your whole life at that one moment. And it's so concentrated. You see your whole past at that one moment. If I've also read about these experiences whereby when you're drowning, like people who have had those experiences when they're drowning and then they can't get any air into their bodies, or that near-death experience. That experience they get, and then they say it back. And so many people have talked about this experience whereby they remember that time when their life phased through their eyes, like their whole life was compressed in this one moment, and they had to pass through this one moment, and they saw their whole life within that one moment. So what happens is, if you get to know Brahma in that one last moment, that means you've been contemplating on Brahma, you've tried to remember Brahma, you've tried to remember yourself for your whole life, and now you're getting to that point. And when you get to it, if you get to it and then you leave this body, then you stay in that state forever. Like you don't have to have this recycle of births and deaths and day in, day out, or year in, year out. You just stay there. And another way you could put it is, when you get enlightened, not just getting a small spark of it, but when you get truly enlightened, you really have this experience of leaving the body, like you're not the body. So you've left the identity of the body. So when you leave the body and you have identified yourself different from the body, you have reached that state. So this is another way of putting it into context, is Tyajan Deham, as I had explained to you in previously. So the second meaning of leaving the body, in that meaning, like separating your identity from the body, when you're enlightened, you get one with that state, and you're always in that state now. Ananyacheta satatam yomam smarati nityashah tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yoginah. Ananyacheta, as we have talked about, is another. Now, Ananyacheta, it is Ananya in a way could mean putting it, focusing it towards one. That's ananya. Another way of putting it, so na anya is ananya, meaning there should be no any other in that. Sometimes when you say that your concentration should be towards one, we don't really get the context of it. But when we say your concentration should not go into any other, you get the context of it, whereby there should be no other. It should only be one. And then satatam, continuously, not breaking it, like akhanda. You have that, you have that continuous remembrance of yourself. Satatam yo mam smarati nityasha. So continuous remembrance of yourself. And you can stay there. Then for that person who can continuously stay there, he is in the state of enlightenment. Tasyaham sulabha parth. He doesn't have to go through much difficulty. It's just an instant. For him, it's nature for him. Yeah. For us, like how it's nature to eat, how it's nature to see anything. For him, it's just nature. Like it is nature for us to think about any subject. Yeah? For him, it's just nature. For that person, it's nature. It's sulabha because he's always in that state. Mamupetya punarjanma dukhalayam shaswatam napnuvanti mahatman sansiddhim paramam gataha. So after reaching me, so in reaching me, because the me in Krishna is the Brahma, not the ego, not the personified self, not the thoughts, but the Brahma that Krishna is talking about, because Krishna identifies himself with Brahma, as one with Brahma. Now when he talks about me, then he's talking about that Brahma. So when one gets to that Brahma, one gets one with that Brahma. So he does not have to go in this cycle of punarjanma, birth and death, regressive, like it's always continuous. He doesn't have to go in that. And how is that punarjanma known in Indian thought? It is dukhalayam ashaswatam. Yeah? It's one thing is dukhalayam. So it is a house of sorrows. And then ashaswatam, meaning it's never constantly there. It's always changing. How I would like to explain dukhalayam is in a way. We could also say that when we are reborn, or in this life, basically, in this life, we have both sorrow and happiness. So why is this being talked about from the perspective of sorrow only? Yeah. Now, how we view sorrow and happiness in our context is totally different. Yeah. Because when we see that we are happy, it is not true happiness in a way. Because, for example, if a person has carried a load on his head for like a long time, for like an hour, now that is sorrow. When he puts that load down, he will feel happiness. But is that really happiness, or is it just the absence of sorrow? That's what we have to think about. Yeah, is it truly happiness? And then you would say that, oh, it's not about taking away sorrow only, but it's also about achievements. Like we have worldly achievements. Maybe I don't have $1,000 right now, so I'll get to $1,000, then $10,000. So it's not about only about leaving sorrows back, but it's also about achievements. But also think about achievements. Yeah, how do you come about those achievements? One context is the world makes up these concepts about what happiness is. So there is an idea of happiness, maybe money, fame, anything. So it is one idea that has come up, like what is more valuable. If we can even see, $1 is more valuable than a shilling, or it's more valuable than a rupee, and then a euro is more valuable than $1. So all those values that are put to it, to your, let's put it to the context that it is just an idea that forms around. Yeah? So even the happiness that you're getting to, like the happiness of getting to fame, or the happiness of being known by so many people, first of all, you have put a value to it, and then you're getting to it. But is there any value, really any value to it, without you attaching value to it? Like, is there any value to that happiness that you're achieving? Is there any value to the $1,000 that you have that you've attained? Or is there any value in the being known to 10,000 people? That's what we have to contemplate on. That's what we have to think about. Or is it just that so many people know you, or it is culture that value is attached to it, that you're seeing happiness in it? Yeah. So the different views of happiness. So that's why it is called dukhalaya. So basically, when you get to that happiness of $1,000, you again have a desire of getting more. You're not content with it. Actually, if when you go around and see on the streets, so many people have the cars that they wished for, yeah, or the houses that they wished for. But driving that car that you wished for, how happy are you? That's the question. Because in a way, if we could say that a farmer riding on his horse could even be happier than you, than you wanting this car and then getting to this car, and you're still stressed with having this car, and you're worried and you're in sorrow. So what is happiness, basically? That's the question here. Is it what you think it is, or is it just an illusion? When you get to it, there's more. Like on the road, when you get to this, I've forgotten this word, but on the road ahead, when you see this, the sun reflection, and it looks like water, yeah, and
Mirage. It's called a
yeah,
mirage.
yeah, exactly, a mirage. So you look at the mirage in front and you think it's water, but is it really water? That's the question here. The happiness that we think about, is it really happiness? Or is it maybe just an absence of sorrow, or an idea of happiness that you brought about? So what happiness is, we really have to think about it and know what the real happiness underlying is. Whether we have an idea of it or not, it's another thing. But when we get to that happiness, there's no getting back any sorrow. It's total happiness. It's total bliss when you're in enlightenment. Brahma bhuvana loka punaravartinorjuna mamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. So in all these worlds, we could say, they're all, you have to come back, like day in, day out, sun rises, sun sets, year in, year out, like the earth rotates around the sun continuously, year in, year out. Actually, there's a revolution, yeah, and then the rotation of the earth is the day in, day out. So all those contexts put in, it's just continuous. It's going to come and go, always. And that means punaravartino. So it's going to go and come back. cyclic in a way. But mamupetya tu kaunteya. Now Krishna is saying, but if you get to me, if you get to the ultimate truth, then punarjanmana vidya, this cycle that we're talking about, it's not there anymore. It's now going to be total bliss, and it's only going to be a state of being, not a cycle.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. I don't know what it is, but I don't know whether I am understanding Gita better and better, or you're getting better and better at describing it. But this is just, it's getting, this entire experience is getting better and better. So just wonderful. I know that you have to leave. You have to leave by 11 o'clock, right?
No, not today.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was just last week.
Wonderful. Okay. So this is just incredible. So I want to open it up for comments and questions. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have a comment or a question. I'm going to give you guys the first opportunity to ask things. Joe, go ahead.
So mine's just a basic clarification is about this idea of happiness, because I think it's aligned very closely with like Stoic concepts, essentially. It's not the absence of sorrow, right? So that because the absence of sorrow means you would be fulfilling your desires with externals, but that's why that's not true happiness, because then that's not sustainable, because then you're actually just on a hedonic treadmill. So that what you're really finding out to be your happiness is supposedly just, it's your core. It's not anything that's managed to anything external. Am I understanding that process correctly?
Yeah, that's right. That's how it should be.
Okay,
I mean, I know those basic, but I was just wanted to make sure the absence of sorrow was something I wanted to.
Thank you. The best way of thinking about it is this, I think, the center and periphery. But this time, don't think of it as static. Think of it as dynamic. The periphery is always moving. You know, you're going through these cycles and you're looking for something and you're going, but at the same time, you're coming back to the same point. You're not really making any progress. You're just going round and round. The center is stationary. So when you go to this, what he's saying is that, what Sri Krishna is saying is that I'm at the center. When you go to the center, all these cycles cease. You actually may be living and you may be doing the same, you know, you may be engaging in life in the full way, but you're standing at the center. So all of these things are just happening and you're not attached to it. You're not saying, oh, I need to do this. You're not stressed about it. So I think that, you know, thinking of the center as being the unmoved part of you, I think that's very powerful. Anybody else wants to ask anything? Let me go ahead. I want to read. I like the 9, the one that we started out with. So I'm going to read the translation of Aurobindo, that this supreme self is the seer, the ancient of days, subtler than the subtle, and in his eternal self-vision and wisdom, the master and ruler of all existence, who sets in their place, in his being, all things that are. His form is unthinkable. He is refulgent as the sun, bright as the sun, beyond the darkness. He who thinketh upon this Purusa in the time of departure with motionless mind, a soul armed with the strength of yoga, a union with God in bhakti, and the life force entirely drawn up and set between the brows in the seat of mystic vision, attains to this supreme divine Purusha. But I love the description of it. And I'm going to read out the description, just this first verse, the ninth verse from Jnaneshwar. Je zune gaganahuni, one that is more ancient than the sky. Ni sukshma paramanhuni, and smaller and subtler than the atom. Jayacha karana vishwa nirvati, one that is the cause of generation of the entire world. Jethuni sarva srushti prakatate, from which all of nature emerges. Zaya karane srushti salate, the reason, which is the reason for the operation of nature. Aise manatita tattva sakshi, that is the truth that you get to when you focus on me. Zashi valuvi na lagate agnisa, just like no insect can really disturb a fire. Va andhara na zakare prakashasa, just like darkness cannot cover the light. Taise mana buddhi indriyasa agamyate, just like that it is ungraspable, because this is experience that is ungraspable by concepts. You have to experience it. So you can take all the effort, as Yogeshwar was pointing out. The other thing is that the Indian philosophy actually maps all of this into the body. And that is very beautiful. It's very, very beautiful that you can go up to this point. You know, you can think, you can concentrate, but then at some point you experience it. It comes to you. It's like the concept of grace. You know, you have to say yes, be open to it, and then it happens to you. It's like there is nothing you can do beyond a certain point. You can work up to a point. I see Divya Prakashachi Rasa, Jin na mavare va ye udayasa. So this bright light, which is at the core of your being, which never sets. This is like the sun at the core of your being. It never sets and it never rises because it is always there. Titya jnani janasa anubhavayate. That sun is experienced by a yogi, person who knows. So that is Jnaneshwar's commentary on 9. This is so beautiful. I mean, it's just you know, I don't know what to say. You know, it's like, and I've been listening to this again and again. I particularly like Jnaneshwar's because the beauty of it is so incredible. It's there in the original Gita, but what Jnaneshwar does is that he takes it and he builds on it, and he is, you know, kind of poetically explains it. All right. Anybody else has any comments? All right. So what we are going to do next is tomorrow. Don't miss tomorrow. Okay. We've got this meetup at 9 p.m. But I've got some really special meetups. One of my favorites that I always look forward to the entire month is Yasuhiko's meetup. that is going to be at 11 a.m. tomorrow. And he's going to be talking about something really remarkable. He's going to be talking about polymathic, autodidactic spirituality. Means, you know, he's a deeply spiritual person. You know, he became a Zen Buddhist monk at the age of 16. Spent like 3 years. He spent 3 years in India studying Indian philosophy. So he's familiar with the Japanese Zen Buddhist tradition, the Indian tradition. He has translated Tao Te Ching. He's familiar with the Chinese tradition. He's deeply familiar with the Western tradition. So he has spirituality from multiple sources. And he also thinks of spirituality as being integrated with life. So he looks at philosophy and sees, okay, what can you learn about spirituality when you study Aristotle? So he's going to be talking about polymathic. So it's like, how can you come at spirituality through the study of multiple fields? Autodidactic. How do you teach yourself? You know, how do you study? How do you structure your study of spirituality? How do you do it yourself? Because if your mind is open to multiple traditions and you are learning yourself, it's a way, because all traditions kind of tend to become ritualized. This is a way of remaining alive to the core meaning of traditions. And that's what, you know, we're going to be talking about. I don't know what he's going to say. We will find out together, but it's going to be an incredible conversation. That's going to be at 11 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. On this meetup, we're going to cover the rest of chapter 8 tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Then on Sunday, Mark Stallman is going to be back, and he's going to be discussing a very interesting topic: the reaction of the Catholic Church to the modern world, of the coming of printing and the modern world through something called the encyclicals. So he's going to look at the history of the church to see how did church respond to modern times? And that's very, very interesting for me, because in some ways, India has like a oral tradition, which the core of it has maintained. I think it has remained like that. The West is it approaches things differently. And to see it kind of, you know, how did the West handle the modern times? You know, Western religion, specifically the Catholic Church, handle the modern times. And you're going to get a great overview of that. And that's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. At 5 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to be looking at Dostoevsky's work. And we have got, I think there are 2 other meetups tomorrow. So there's a lot of meetups, and we hope to see you. Hope to see you at one of them. Yogeshwar, so this is really getting good. I'm enjoying this more and more. How do you feel?
It's nice for me. It's because for me it's a new experience, like explaining these ideas towards a Western audience.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I have always, like, learning Gita or learning the Upanishads or learning any Indian philosophy, I've been only oriented towards Indian, like, you know, even classmates or people who are studying with me, they're all using the same philosophy and they understand it in the same way. Like, for example, if there is one thing in Gita, the only proof it needs is, if it's in the Upanishads, it is a proof that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just give a reference of the Upanishad.
Mhm.
Now that doesn't work with the Western audience because they do not know the Upanishads, they do not know the Indian philosophy. So what happens is I have to I try to give experiences and examples that we have on a regular basis, on a daily life basis, and then build upon it. And for me, it was like, sometimes also I feel only giving reference with the Upanishads and stuff, it gets ritualized and conceptualized in a way that it gets away from true life and true practice. So this is also a way of bringing it back, like explaining it towards where I can't say it definitely originated from such a concept, but maybe we can try to contemplate how these ideas originated or how they came to be. Yeah.
No,
How?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
I found, I'll give you two examples which are similar. I mean, for me, I find that whenever I'm studying something, I always do meetups on it, because just talking things out, trying to explain to just another consciousness is crucial, because it's very easy to get caught up in the way in which you're thinking things. Or if you're dealing with a group of people who are used to certain terminology, then you are basically just exchanging some concepts without really getting to the heart of the matter. If you can explain to anybody, what I used to do is I used to do these meetups in New York, and I would get 60 to 80 people showing up. And it's so many different perspectives, right? So many different knowledge levels. And to try to, explain to everybody, try our best, hear their questions and try to answer them. It really improves my understanding of anything. So that's one. Second example I want to talk about is Naneshwar. Because what Naneshwar is doing is that he's saying, look, this is not only for people who are scholars. This is truth, which is useful to any human being who wants to, get closer to God. And I will explain it to people in a way where they can understand it, even if they can't read and write. Okay, it's kind of like that. It's like, because what happens is that when you're dealing with another culture like the West, see, I'm an immigrant, I came here, and you kind of, and there is an advantage of being an immigrant, because this is like, what happens is that all of us have certain ways of thinking that we grow up with, that becomes habituated with us. And now when you move to another country or start to talk to people from a completely different country, you're forced to actually revisit many things that you're taking for granted. And I find it to be just tremendously, tremendously enlightening experience. It's like, it is corrective, it is enriching too, because the other people, it's not just about you. It's like the other people will bring in something and you say, I had not really thought of that. I had not seen that application. That, oh, this entire area, many times people will say something, not that they're trying to communicate to me, but they just say something which will just, I'll just wake up and say, wait a minute, I had not even seen that before. So I think all of us are learning a great deal from this. So it's and folks, just wonderful to have you here. And I'm very impressed. I was scared, okay, when I started this thing, because I was saying that, okay, how am I going to bridge this gap, between the Indian mind and the Western mind? And I think we are making some headway. And I'm really encouraged by just so many of you who are putting so much work into trying to get, and it shows from the comments you're making, the questions you're asking. So thank you so much. And folks, see you soon. Bye, everybody. Bye, Yogeshwar.